Welcome, everyone, to the Kalamazoo Astronomical Society's special online astrophotography tutorial. It is absolutely wonderful to have you all here this evening. Hopefully, the weather is poor for you, so you're not missing a great night of imaging. But if you are, that probably means you need help. And we have someone here that can help you with your imaging here tonight. So we're not going to waste too much time. Give them plenty of time and have plenty of time for Q&A. So I think basically the way this is going to work is maybe we'll leave it up to Trevor every roughly 10, 15 minutes or so. We can kind of pause and take questions because if we try to do them as you get them, we'll never get this done. We would like it to go a long time, but not forever. So let's go ahead and get into this. So let me give a brief intro, but you all know who our guest is tonight. So tonight's special guest has become one of the most recognizable voices in modern amateur astronomy and astrophotography. He is a full-time astrophotographer and content creator based in Niagara, Ontario, Canada, whose background in creative arts and graphic design helped shape the clear, visually engaging style that defines his website and YouTube channel, AstroBackyard, which he founded in 2015. And I heard about it fairly early, probably around 2016, because that's the last time I attended NEAF. And I was walking around, looking at all the booths, and someone walked up to this guy and said, "Oh, I love your channel, Astro Backyard." And I was like, "What's that?" So the first time I ever heard about it was at NEAF in 2016. So from 2013 to 2018, he was an active member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada's Niagara Center, serving both as website coordinator and newsletter editor. That sounds vaguely familiar. So, what began as a backyard hobby became a full time career in 2019. Today, his YouTube channel has grown to more than 527,000 subscribers with nearly 67 million views, making it one of the most influential resources for the aspiring deep sky imager. Through tutorials, equipment reviews, and step-by-step imaging walkthroughs, he brings clarity to a hobby often considered formidably technical. He has been photographing the night sky since 2010, and he continues to use that hands-on experience to help others discover the joy of astrophotography. And so this is, again, a two-part presentation, and we are doing the entire thing tonight. Part one is about this little thing here, the ASIAIR, and then part two will be all about Photoshop. So without further ado, please welcome Trevor Jones from Astro Backyard.
Thanks, Richard, for that introduction. Thanks, everyone, for having me and for joining the talk. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Looks like I'm
I can.
unmuted. Yeah, okay, good. Yep, I'll keep an eye on the chat there, and I'll get right into sharing my screen for my presentation about the ASIAIR to start. There we go. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay?
We can.
Awesome. Okay. So this talk is going to be about the ZWO ASIAIR. I guess there's mostly Americans here. I'll call it the ZWO ASIAIR. So this is this magical little box that I've been using to control my astrophotography in the backyard and beyond for the last at least 5, 6 years now. I've been at this hobby for a long time. And I did start with the digital camera, but I was always using my laptop computer, running multiple pieces of software to control the different components, whether it was auto guiding or the camera automation or whatever. So the ASIAIR kind of combines all that together. So in this talk, we'll talk about what it does, how I use it, and some tips and tricks for a smooth experience. And there you can see the little red box. That's the ASIAIR Plus, the latest version of the ASIAIR, and then one of my more recent setups there in the backyard with my Newtonian reflector and all the bells and whistles. So the agenda, we'll talk about what the ASIAIR is, because if it's new to you, it just looks like this red box. Who's it for? I think most people can really appreciate this device. It's not for everyone, though. The overview of the hardware and how it works, my workflow, some tips and tricks, as I said, some common mistakes, and the strengths and limitations of this device. The background image there is Comet Lemon from last fall, which was just an incredible experience. And the reason I put it there is because I used the ASI Air to capture that moment, and time was of the essence there. It was for if you remember that comet, it didn't spend long in the sky before it set. So if I use the ASI Air on a project like that, where it's around for a short time, limited clear sky time, you know it's a device you can trust for important projects. So Richard already covered it pretty well, but just so you guys know who I am, I'm an astrophotographer with over a decade of imaging experience. I'm kind of known as the backyard astrophotographer. So even though I do like to travel, I love star parties and traveling to dark sky sites. Most of the astrophotography I do is in the backyard. Usually Rudy is right next to me as he is in that picture on the right there. So I'm in the unique position to be testing a wide range of telescopes, cameras, and imaging setups because I review these products on my YouTube channel and I write on my website, astrobackyard.com. So, I've seen a lot of gear. So, I know what I like. I know what works well. I know what makes my life easier because that's what it's all about when I'm teaching others how to do astrophotography. The gear it has the least amount of friction really stands out, and the ASI Air is definitely one of those products. So my passion is just to inspire others to get into astrophotography. I don't like the way it used to be when I started was it was like this exclusive club of astrophotographers, and it's very technical and steep learning curve, and it's hard to get into, and we don't want too many people doing it. Those days are over. It's wide open. It's becoming more mainstream, and I just love it because it gets more people looking up and enjoying the night sky and enjoying space and nature and everything else that comes with it. But, I don't have to tell you guys about that. Here's just some recent images so you can see the kind of images that I like to take. It's usually wide field nebulae, like the Bubble Nebula there, Thor's Helmet, and the Tulip Nebula. And these are, just some recent projects, all done from the backyard using filters. Thank goodness for filters because I am in a very light polluted area. I'm a Bortle 6, although it's probably more like a Bortle 7 these days. So what is the ASI Air? That is the ASI Air Plus, right as it came out of the box when it first arrived a few years ago. So it's a mini PC basically. It's a mini computer. It's a controller with software installed to control ZWO systems, their cameras, their autofocuser, their mount. There is some cross compatibility with other telescope mounts, DSLR cameras, but for the most part, it's a closed ecosystem for better or for worse controlling ASI cameras and the ZWO gear. So we'll get into those limitations later, but it's mainly for ZWO, camera equipment that they make. So you control everything on this computer through a mobile app on your phone or your tablet. So it's very intuitive. It's very, you always have your phone in your pocket. You can control an entire deep sky imaging session from your phone, which whether that's on the road at a dark sky site or in your backyard, just around the house. I've really gotten used to that experience of controlling a session on my phone. So it connects and coordinates your telescope mount, your camera, of course, and then your secondary guide camera for auto guiding, your off-axis guider, all that connected. An autofocuser, that's very important. It can autofocus for you using the software in there. Your filter wheel, automatic filter changes, and then your dew heaters. You can see how much power is being used. And then storage, and you can power your devices from this little box as well. So basically, your power is going into the ASI Air, and then you can power your other devices from there. So it's kind of a power hub as well. Who is it for? So they've really went after beginners here. because as I was talking about earlier, that the steep learning curve of astrophotography was so daunting only a short few years ago. But this ASIAIR has removed a lot of the frustration with a deep sky imaging session, largely because that software is so intuitive and so easy to use, where you really don't have to think too much about things like auto guiding and adjusting the settings. It's just kind of a one-click start auto guiding. And many of the things that you just, even now, I take for granted that this little thing does. The not having multiple pieces of software with outdated drivers on your computer, all these things. So just in general, the technical friction, it reduces that. So anyone that's tired of that experience or has never or doesn't want to get into it at all is really going to appreciate the ASI Air. So I consider myself an intermediate to an advanced astrophotographer, and this I don't feel like this is holding me back in any way. Software like Nina is great on your laptop. It can do a little bit more in terms of control and flexibility. But like I said, for advanced serious projects, I don't feel that you're holding yourself back by using the ASI Air whatsoever. So if you're already using a lot of ZWO gear, it makes a lot of sense to use an ASIAIR. Their cameras are incredibly popular because they're very reliable. Some of the best cameras on the market. There's more competitors now in the camera market than ever, but they still make great cameras, those ASI cameras. So if you already own one of those and you're not using an ASIAIR yet, it's definitely something to consider. If you're even if you image in the backyard and setting up a laptop computer and a table and all that isn't a problem, it is still often quicker and easier to just use the ASI Air as your computer on board on the telescope and connect via your phone. And if you're traveling, it makes even more sense to not have to bring a laptop computer and that whole setup when you can just bring your phone and this little red box. If you prefer using a tablet and your phone over a laptop computer, you don't need that full keyboard and everything, then you're definitely going to like the ASIR as well. So here, the pictures here, there's just a bunch of different setups. That's the Newtonian reflector setup on the bottom middle there, and then a different Skywatcher mount and a smaller refractor telescope on the right. And then that image of Andromeda is a very recent image captured last fall with my portable ASI Air setup. So I think we're at just over 10 minutes of me yapping. Is there any questions at this point?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, just use the raise your hand feature.
Perfect. And then, Richard, are you going to kind of filter them and read it out to me, or do you want me to go in and look?
Oh, sure, I could read it if it's in the chat.
Yeah, yeah. If that way, if you go in the chat and there's a good question, then maybe
Sure.
you can deliver that. That would be easy, and then I don't have to
Yeah,
leave
we have one
this.
from one of our members, Brody. I believe he's all of 15 years old and he's good
Awesome.
already. Is the ASIR good for projects over, say, 60 hours that have a lot of sub exposures? Is there any problems about storage?
Nope. So the way it works for my workflow, usually after a night of imaging, unless I have back-to-back nights, I'll pull all of the data off and store it and organize it and everything. And then I'll continue a project by adding more. If you're worried about actually running out of storage space on the device, I use a 128 gigabyte thumb drive that just plugs right into the device. So that can hold a lot, and then I just transfer the data over. But no problem with those long-term projects with the ASI Air. I mean, I bet you could put 60 hours that would fit in 128 gigs, but depends on the camera you're using, of course.
Okay, here's, of course, probably the most obvious question. What does one of those cost?
Ooh, it's currently 300 US, I believe. Yeah, so I mean, it's considering what you're getting, it's a steal, I would consider, especially when you consider the price of all of the other equipment on your rig. So for it to be the hub and controller of everything for three to $400 is that's pretty good.
All right, and one more here. Eric, another member, Eric Klein. Is it compatible with multiple systems, non-ZWO mounts?
Non-ZWO mounts, yes, it's compatible with, I've used it on several Skywatcher mounts. That's really the only other mount type I've used it with other than their AM5, AM7 mounts and stuff. But yes, mounts wide open, pretty much all of them. And then it does control a number of DSLR and mirrorless cameras as well if you're shooting with one of those. The where it stops is the competitors to ZWO like Player One or QHY or Tube Tech. Yeah, the ASIAIR won't control those cameras. And I'll get to the alternatives if you are using those cameras near the end of the presentation.
Great. So we'll go ahead and move on. We'll take more questions later. Thanks, Trevor.
Awesome. Thank you, Richard. So the hardware overview, this is just a better look at the box. You can see some of the output ports there. That main one, the DC 12 volt input, is the main power to the box. So that's a cable that you'll have to plug in. The one end will be in either a portable battery pack if you're on the road, or I'm usually just plugged into household AC power to with an adapter to power the ASI Air, and then I'll use those output ports to power the camera and stuff, but not the mount. The mount needs its own power. I've heard people can powering their mount with an ASI Air, but I've always used separate power for each because that there's quite a draw on that mount. And then the USB ports there you can see on the side view. The USB 3.0 are the blue ones and 2.0 are the black. So I put my thumb drive for my pictures as they're getting stored in the USB 3.0 for the faster speed. And then the other ones can be for anything else plugging into you connecting your mount or all your other accessories. So yeah, very compact. This thing is the size of like a wallet basically, but a very thick red metal wallet. It's a Raspberry Pi operating system on there. So, but it has that ZWO software on it for their ASIAIR mobile app, which is the real value in this thing. That's what they offer. You could of course have your own mini PC, and people do, and install their own software and get it working with everything, pulling it all together. You can definitely do that if you feel like a challenge. The amazing thing about the ASI Air is just how good their software is, where it's just worth that closed system. So it creates its own dual band Wi-Fi network. So that little, you can see it, the antenna on the side there. So it actually has its own Wi-Fi signal that you connect to. That's how you connect your mobile phone to the app and to the ASI Air to control it. And then you can actually use something called station mode, where it uses your home network if you're imaging at home, where you have much wider range of Wi-Fi, where you actually never lose connection. And a lot of people, early on that don't really understand how it works, thinking that if you lose your Wi-Fi connection, that it just stops the session or something goes wrong. It's the imaging session, if you're running one, still continues to run. Everything's going fine until you do reconnect as you get closer to it. The range is, I think they listed at something like 15 meters. It's probably less than that, more like 10 meters. You really want to be close-ish to your mount to stay connected. And then so those power ports there, which is handy for powering your gear, and then your USB ports, as I mentioned. So here's a nice uh, pretty typical looking setup for a lot of people using a mix of gear. It's not a completely red rig like some of the ones I use. So you can see the Skywatcher mount. It's an affordable, the Skywatcher EQ AL55. It's kind of a step up from the GTI for anyone's familiar with that one. I really like this mount. I think it's 700 US, and it's just a nice solid performer. The telescope on there, an SV Bony 550. And then, so I've got my dew heater on there. You can see the power supply. The camera I'm using is the 585 MC Pro, one of ZWO's most popular color deep sky cameras. And then that's the ASI Air Mini, which is one of the options, the smallest one. Has a few less options than the Plus, which I normally use. And you can see the little guide camera in there, the ASI 120 mm Mini, and a tiny little guide scope. So pretty typical looking setup there. And I actually was demoing the little power box there too, just to clean up some of the cabling. So pretty typical looking setup there with an ASIAIR involved. Yep. So nothing too interesting here. Yeah. So it's more about the just a typical looking setup there. So here's an example setup. This one's actually currently set up. I'm really happy with this system and what I've been doing with it. Just because I'm usually shooting with wide field refractors, this Newtonian reflector setup gets me in a little further at 800 millimeter focal length to get some detail on some smaller targets. So in this instance, the ASI Air is controlling the AM7 telescope mount, an ASI 2600 Pro monochrome camera. So when you use a mono camera, it's a more complex setup because you have a filter wheel in there, an electronic filter wheel where you can choose the filters through the app, the ASI Air app. And then I have an autofocuser on there. It's actually not, that's right before I installed it, so it's not in that picture, but that setup has an autofocuser as well, and we'll get into that. And another setup for with the ASI Air, this was that picture of Andromeda, and this one's actually using the ASI 2600 MC Air, which is one of their cameras that has the ASI Air built in. So you would think like, oh, that's kind of why would you want that if you already have this the modularity of an ASI Air and whatever camera you want. It's actually really handy for a clean, quick setup to have the ASI Air built in. And as a benefit, these cameras also have a guide sensor. It's a dual sensor design. So you have this one camera attached at the end of your telescope running your entire session from the auto guiding to the ASI Air. It's all in one. So it's a really clean, minimalistic setup. And so it's set up there. I'm in a field powered by a battery at an Airbnb I rented under Bortle 3 skies. So a big fan of a setup like that. If keeping things portable and lightweight is of importance to you. So my favorite features. So probably my favorite overall is the Sky Atlas Planetarium in there. So there's lots of versions of this throughout the years. I can't remember the name of the really old one I used to use on my laptop, but they've come a long way. But the main idea is plate solving. So you can actually see you get a preview of your field of view using your current camera and the using the telescope mount and the software, it will slew over to the direction of the sky that you want to go, take a short picture, understand the position of the stars, and then recenter it because it knows its exact position using plate solving and taking short pictures of where it's pointed in the sky. And when you have that feature, you don't even realize that the plate solving is happening. You're simply just cruising around the sky and picking a target, tapping it, and your telescope goes right to it and then centers it. The precision of that is so handy, especially for someone like me. It still blows me away. For someone that used to do 3-star alignments with the hand controller, and all of that. It used to be a 10, 15-minute process, is 10 seconds now. So you can see me with my tablet playing Xbox in the basement there, monitoring my session. I just love the that experience of just having my tablet in hand while I'm kind of hanging out and I'm running a long deep sky imaging session, watching my images come through. It's quite a fun experience for deep sky imaging. That's in the winter. In the summer, I do like to spend time outdoors and I'll get the visual daub out and stuff. But in the winter, it's nice to escape inside and see your plan running along. And then you can watch each sub exposure come through. It applies an auto stretch, so you can make sure that everything's running well and you're just monitoring the whole session on that little tablet view there. Another one of my favorite features is the polar alignment tool. This makes it, foolproof basically. I used to manually polar align all my telescope rigs where I'd get down there and put Polaris in the right position, adjusting those Altaz bolts. This one does it a lot more precise by taking pictures of its star position and telling you exactly how far you have to move your telescope mount to get polar aligned. So there's no polar axis through the ZWO mount, so you have to do this process, which was kind of smart on their part because everyone's going to get perfect polar alignment because you have to do it with their ultra precise way. So you can see this is the polar alignment screen there, where you have that target in the bullseye, and you can see the little green smiley face, which means I'm getting very close to perfect polar alignment. Anything under one in that total error is considered good. Okay, and back to the Sky Atlas. Just this is a recent screen looking in my winter sky a month or so ago. The framing is so handy. So for this 585 MC sensor, it's kind of long and narrow, and you can see how the framing is so important in the rotation to get the Orion Nebula and the Running Man. I can get that so precise, the rotation, by getting this feedback of the live view through my camera. So it's essential for long-term projects, relining it up in the exact position. And it's as simple as, dragging the box over and tapping it. So super handy stuff. Any questions at this stage?
Yeah, again, if anyone wants to verbally ask Trevor a question, just raise your virtual hand and I'll unmute you. But we can do a few in the chat here. So, another one from Brody. When you power the ASIR with an external battery, have you had the ASIR die on you while imaging? What do you do if it does?
I've never had the ASI error die while imaging. That would be a problem. So in that scenario with a portable battery, it would likely because the battery ran out. So ensuring that that doesn't happen is really important. So the one I have is ultra powerful and it would last 2 full nights. So yeah, the battery running out is a problem. So getting something is fully charged and topped up, and you have to think about weather if it's cold and stuff like that. Because if it did stop and it lost power to the ASI Air, the tracking would stop, the auto guiding would stop, and so you would have to restart your session and get powered up. That's a different scenario than the one I mentioned earlier of losing the Wi-Fi signal, where it's still continuing to do its thing. You've just lost the Wi-Fi connection from the app. So yeah, it needs to stay powered. That's for sure.
Right? Matt Borton, you can go ahead and
Yeah,
ask your question.
quick question. How do you manage running two ASIAIRs at the same time, two different scopes going on?
Great question. So I never have just one going. Sometimes it's three up to four ASI airs when on a clear night and I really want to make it count. So they all have their own Wi-Fi signal and a unique Wi-Fi name and network to connect to. So it actually is very easy within the app to switch which one you're connected to. And then you keep the app open on your phone, and then you just switch the camera you're connected to, and it will pop over to it and have all of the information you've input on that system will appear. It does kind of a little refresh. But yeah, so through a typical night, I'm hopping between 3 or 4 ASI Air rig controlled rigs, all of them slightly different. So yeah, that's a very common scenario, and there's no problem in terms of running multiple rigs. They all connect, especially if you're at home and you connect them all to your home network, then you're just, you're in it's so easy. You don't have to you can go anywhere and not worry about losing connection.
Another question from another Matt. Does the video you did on budget rig, $2,000, include the ZWO equipment mostly, including the ASIR, or was it the
Uh,
Mini?
it was the mini is a bit cheaper. I think the mini's 199 and it can do a bit less. I can't even remember what it does. I think it doesn't have USB 3.0, but otherwise it's pretty close to fully featured. And yeah, I'd use the mini just to keep that cost down. So if you, I would really recommend getting the ASI Air Plus if this is your first ASI Air, so you can get every feature. The mini is more for if you already have one and you just wanted a secondary one for travel or something like that. I would pay the extra $100 for the plus if you can. That would be my advice there.
I think we got one more here. Can the ZWO camera angle adjuster be controlled by the ASIAIR?
Oh
I would hope
yes,
so.
yes, it can. I haven't. So the thing about the angle adjuster, the CAA that came out not too long ago. So that was kind of the last piece of automation, being able to rotate the camera from your tablet inside without touching your rig. The problem with that is that they're tricky to get the spacing right. Once you add that component, everything was just perfect with the filter wheel and the adapters and everything. But once introducing that into the imaging train, that's the only reason I haven't actually put a CA on my rigs yet. But yes, there's a tab for it for the rotator in the ASI Air. I haven't personally used it myself.
All right. Thank you, Trevor. All right. I
Great,
think we'll go ahead and call it good for now for questions. So take it away.
great. So my setup process, this is before dark, and I have the rig bring everything out. I open the garage door, carry everything out, usually all attached from a previous session. It's always nice when you can keep your rig together and not have to put everything together again. So I'll physically bring it out there, set up the tripod, the mount, attach the telescope. If it's not using a strain wave mount and a traditional EQ mount, I'll balance the telescope. I'll connect the equipment and check the cables, confirm the power to the mount and the ASI Air. The one thing you do have to worry about, not worry about, at least, consider is the when you do plug in your power to the ASI Air, if that cable is a little bit loose and something tugs on it, you could really lose a connection if that got pulled out. So I usually tape them in using some electrical tape just to make sure there's no surprises. With the weather I go through too in the winter, sometimes the cables get kind of stiff and heavy, and even that weight puts some tension on them. So cable management is key, and then making sure that nothing's going to get pulled out of the socket or anything like that. So there is an actual power on switch on the ASI Air. I'm guilty of usually leaving it on at all times, and just when I plug in the AC power, that's when it comes on. But you'll hear it beep, and then you'll be able to connect to it through your mobile app. And you can just make sure that your camera's connected and all your accessories are showing up. You know, worst case scenario, you don't see one of your devices, your autofocus just isn't showing up. Unplug it, plug it back in, boom, detected. There it is. Compared to what I used to go through with all these pieces of software and drivers, there's a lot less worrying about that kind of stuff with the ASIAIR. It's pretty reliable that way. So my workflow is after everything's all set up, I can start to polar align my telescope mount, which I can do at dusk before it's fully dark out, which is nice. So I'm not cutting into any imaging time. So this involves an actual manual process of adjusting the alt-az bolts on your telescope mount. If you've ever done this before, polar alignment, it's a lot easier than it sounds. It's just subtle adjustments until the polar axis is pointed at the north celestial pole for us. And then using that wizard in the ASI Air app, you can really get precise with that polar alignment. So that always feels good to get that level of precision and not have to worry about polar alignment, because that's a critical first step of deep sky astrophotography. So then you also need to have a rough focus before the polar align for it to be able to read those stars. So if you're not in focus at all, that's actually the first step. And we'll talk about it in a minute, but the ASI Air mobile app has a nice live view looped image for focus. So even if it's at dusk and you put that live loop on every 2 seconds, you can manually go in and out with that focuser and make sure those stars are in good enough focus to at least polar align and to plate solve and understand its position. We go into more fine precision focusing right before you're ready to start imaging your target, but a rough focus is easy to do as well. And then the guide calibration is important too. So your secondary guide camera is looking at the same field of view as your primary camera and telescope. And then you want to make sure that that's calibrated and that your mount understands the movement and the feedback there between how much moving 2 pixels is, so it can do that throughout your session. So that's the opening screen there. So the device connection, you can see there in my case, those are my devices connected. The mount, the ZWO AM3, AM5, AM7 are all the same mount connection. So I use all three of those. It's the same connection there. It auto detects it when it's plugged into to the mount. You can see it set up there. That one's a USB Type B cable into the mount. Whereas my Skywatcher mounts, it's a bit different. It's like an RJ45 style cable. I think it's 12 pin. It's that on one side and USB on the other, and that plugs into the ASIAIR. And then that's, of course, a different selection from the drop-down menu, Skywatcher mounts, and so on. But when you look at that list of supported mounts, there's probably 100 in there. Then you can see the main camera is the 585 MC Air, just to make things more confusing for you. That's another one of their Air cameras where the ASI Air is built in. I use that quite often. And then the guide camera, that secondary sensor is the ASI 220 Mini, or just And then that focal length is really, really important, making sure you have the accurate focal length of the telescope you're using input in there with your camera, because that's how the plate solving works. If you have the wrong focal length in there, say I had 800, it would get a misreading of the star field because it's looking for a certain scale. So that's super important that you see your camera and your device is connected and that you get that focal length correct. So the polar alignment, we talked about this earlier. This is the screen there. It's a pretty quick process. I love that they do their little green smiley face man when you've got it good enough. So they say under 2 arc minutes is sufficient. You'll get a smiley face for that. Who wouldn't try and make that as good as possible, though? You don't want to spend too much. If you've spent 20 minutes trying to fine tune your polar alignment, you've spent too long. But definitely under 1 arc minute is good. You can see at that total error. And then so the down arrow is the up and down, and the left arrow you see there is the left and right with the Altaz bolts. So it's once you've done it a few times, it's really easy to do. It's kind of fun. You actually get to do something with your hands and not just sit there on your phone. So I enjoy that part. And it's at dusk too. So you're kind of hearing all the sounds of nature and animals going to sleep. I don't know, I'm big into the whole rituals of setting up. So it's really, really fun. And yeah, 2 to 3 minutes, or in this case for my screenshot, it took me 4 minutes and 9 seconds. It does time you just to stress you out there. Any questions on the polar alignment? I don't expect there to be, but there might be.
I don't see any on any polar alignment.
Okay.
We do have Jeff Miller raising his hand. So, Jeff, I'll give you a chance to unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Sure. Yeah. This isn't about polar alignment. I'm kind of jumping ahead here.
Yeah.
As far as the focus calibration, do you recommend doing it at the start of the evening or is it something you should do with each new target?
Okay, so the guiding calibration or focus calibration, like dialing in your focus. Oh, guiding. Yeah, yeah. So I do that right before I'm ready to start imaging. Yeah, that's kind of my last step, because I do that while I'm on my target and wherever it is in the sky. I'm already in focus and I run that calibration. And in the meantime, because it takes like 2 minutes, I set up my imaging plan, and then I see that the guiding calibration is finished and I'm guiding on target straight from that calibration, no moving around after that. And I start my imaging plan.
All right,
So
thanks.
it's one of the last steps. Yep.
Yep.
No problem.
All right. We do
Okay.
have another one in the chat here. We can just read this one real quick. Do the camera integrated ASIAIR models, such as the ASI 585 MC Air, have all the features as the standalone ASIAIR Plus?
Not quite. It doesn't have the power output stuff. So it's no longer kind of a power hub, although you can control other devices from it from the USB. Yeah, it's a little more limited. But the nice thing is your setup is more streamlined too, so you don't have that guide scope on there or a guide camera. But it can control your autofocuser. And then if you have the mono version, it can control the filter wheel too. But yeah, it's missing a few features from the full featured ASI Air. And I would put it in that category, like I said, with the Mini, where it's like it shouldn't be your primary astrophotography controller, but if you're running a secondary rig, it's nice to have. It's a nice to have, or for your travel rig.
Okay. There is one polar alignment question here. How does the device know the polar alignment is right on when there are no stars to see?
Well, the cameras are a lot better than our eyes, so it'll use short exposures, and you can actually change the exposure length up to 10 seconds, and after it'll find some faint stars in there to know where it's pointed. So I said, dusk, but if it's a bit too early and a bit too bright out, it'll have trouble finding stars. But you'd be surprised. I sometimes see Polaris and that's it, and it knows exactly where it is. So yeah, if it's not finding any stars, you just have to wait a little bit longer if it's too early. But yeah, light pollution, not a problem. Light pollution, not a problem. And if you have a filter in front of it, not a problem either. I've had some pretty strong filters in front of it, and the plate stalls still work.
Great. Thanks, Trevor.
No problem. So the camera tab, this is just a little bit more detail here. So all these, where I'm pointing with the arrow there, and you can see all the different little icons. Those are all the different tabs for the devices you have. The Wi-Fi connections at the top, then it's camera, then the next one's your auto guider, then the mount, and then the filter wheel, and then the focuser, and then the angle adjuster, and then the next one is your storage. You'll see your USB. You can choose whether you want to store on board on the ASIAIR or on your thumbstick storage. So this is where you see the gain setting, super important in the camera tab. So if you're coming from the DSLR mirrorless world, it's equivalent to your ISO setting. And you may want to change that depending on the filter you're using or the project. For a lot of these cameras, they have kind of a sweet spot for gain level for where they get the highest dynamic range, and I kind of stick to those. For this 585 MC Air, I use a gain of 200, no matter what filter I'm using or what project I'm doing. But that's where you set that there. And then, as I mentioned, that focal length, super important. And almost cutting off the screen there, your camera temperature too. So these are cooled cameras for low noise performance. And in the winter, I'll run it at minus 20 degrees Celsius. In the summer, it's harder to get it down there. I usually keep it closer to minus 10. But the cooling settings are there. And then I'll show you when we look at a more full view of the imaging session, you can see how much power that's using too to keep it cool. So yeah, something to keep in mind. And the power consumption readings that it gives you are much more important if you're running on battery power in the field somewhere. You're really not too concerned with that if you're running it from home. So yeah, that's all that stuff there in the camera tab. So preview mode, this is as you're kind of getting started, checking your initial focus. We don't need to be super in focus yet, but you can take a preview image there, and then you can there's the focus tab. So if you don't have an autofocuser, I just started using autofocusers in the last like 12 months. I've manually focused for years and years. This focus preview mode, it gives you this live loop. You choose the exposure length with 2 to 5 seconds, and then you get that immediate feedback as you adjust the focus of your system to see if you're getting close or not. And then there's that little box, that green box there, the zoom box. It will give you an actual reading of the star size. And you can keep adjusting your focus, and ideally you get that star size as small as possible. It's kind of a back and forth game because you'll see it. The half flux diameter is the measurement they call it. You'll see the star size 2.1. You go a little further, 2.8, 3.5. Okay, I've gone too far. Go back. Bit of back and forth there. And if you're using an autofocuser, it goes through that process for you, just going back and forth, in and out of focus until that star size reading is as small as it can be. The auto run and sequencing, this is a real one of the main features of the ASIAIR. This is where you set your imaging plan. So you choose your exposure length. In this case, I was using 60-second exposures. The image type, their light frames, the gain setting, and then a number of exposure. I'm taking 360 exposures. That is quite the plan there. They're quite short exposures. Normally, my projects are around the 180 second to 240 sub length. But this was just, yeah, sometimes for a broadband target, 60-second subs. So you automate all of this. You set your plan in there. Looks like I was on M42. That was a real original target choice. And then once your guiding is up and running, you press play essentially, and it starts that process. But so I usually use the auto run for my shooting schedule. There's also plan where you can say, okay, take 60 exposures on Orion, and then change filters, and then hop over to the Seagull Nebula, take 60 seconds on that. And then when you're done that, go back home again and shut off. It's amazing these plans you can set up. Live stacking is really cool. So whether you're just doing EAA and you just want to do kind of that smart telescope experience of where you're using a tablet to view objects in space through these live stacking, or you're running a full featured imaging plan and you just want to build a live stack image and watch it while still collecting all of your sub exposures. It's pretty fun there. You can see in this one, my total overall exposure time is getting close to 2 hours, and it's still pretty weak and noisy. That's the Fox Space Nebula. I don't recommend trying to shoot that if you're in the city. It was just too dim a broadband target. But that's a fun mode to use too, that live stacking mode. The auto guiding. I'm moving a bit quicker just because I saw the time here and I felt I spent too long in the beginning part. So I'll try to cover all this and get it in before 9 o'clock. So for guiding, that calibration we were talking about earlier, it's the first step before you're actually guiding. So your stars are in focus through your guide camera, and it's using multi-star auto guiding. So you can see the circles there. Those are all the guide stars it's using. And you calibrate it. It's just it does a little routine with your mount saying, okay, we're going to shift the mount to the left a little bit. Okay, good. We're going to shift the mount to the right a little bit. Okay, good. Just so it has that, it can send those little pulses to the mount to make adjustments for better tracking overall. One of the best things about the ASIAIR is you really don't think about all that stuff happening. Whether it's dithering and guiding and all that stuff, just know that you're getting better tracking by using this auto guide feature. If you have your guide camera or one of those duo sensor air cameras. The plate solving we talked about, super important for framing up your target. The reason I use this image here, you can see detected 1,060 stars. So it really reads everything and it understands its exact position and then validates centered or not. Sometimes it'll find its rough position and then do a little adjustment to get it centered, which is super important, especially for those multiple night projects when you want to line them back up to where you were the night previously. This is the autofocus tool. And what I was talking about earlier with that star size. So if you're making the manual adjustments, you can see the star size reading in that zoom mode. And then if you're using an autofocuser, it does this V curve where it's calculating the focus point going in and out of focus. And that is really the foolproof method of being in focus and staying in focus. The autofocuser unlocks some really cool features like refocus again if the temperature changes by 2 degrees, because that usually requires a refocus. Refocus again if you're switching filters, because there's a good chance that your new filter isn't quite in the same focus position, or after a meridian flip, which is, you're kind of shaking things up a little bit. All these little tools to adjust focus without touching the telescope in a much more precise way. So not a necessary accessory, but an autofocuser is pretty handy. You'll never regret owning one of those. So during your session, this is what I do. This is capturing the Rosette Nebula there. this is a pretty typical looking screen. I can see my image preview of the latest sub. That's a 300-second exposure. I can see my guiding graph small on the top left there. And then I can see my camera temperature and gain I'm using. Minus 20 degrees Celsius is the temperature, the gain of 100, and how long until the meridian flip is coming. That's something to monitor as well. So it can do a meridian flip and get back to your target on its own for anyone that's used to that procedure. And you better make sure that your cabling is good and you have a clean rig. Not like the one you see me using on the right there for a meridian flip, because that's when things could get caught up. It's quite the dramatic shift in movement of your telescope. And then dithering is important. You can choose how often this happens. Dithering is a feature in auto guiding where it actually shifts your image frame by a pixel or two every so often. And that helps in the stacking process to create a cleaner image. It's a pretty cool, painless, easy to use feature. Here's a closer look at that screen with the things I talked about there. Any questions about the user interface during an imaging session?
There is one question in the chat. Can you explain how you guided the ASIAIR to follow the comet in your initial image instead of the stars?
Oh, that's right. So that one was I did guide the stars, and that comet was moving. So that was more of a stacking change as opposed to a change in my procedure for capturing. So yes, it was tracking the stars, and that comet was moving independently from it. So that kind of, again, when I was talking about the critical time and stressfulness of a situation like that, I got an hour on it because I knew it would shift out of frame over time. So yeah, it was I just did everything as normal and then isolated the comet and stacked it separately with the blurred stars, took them out, and then put the stars back in. Great question.
And one more here. Does your carbon star have issues with backlash with the autofocuser?
It does not. No, and I do hear people having backlash issues where, like, for lack of a better description, it's just a little loose and it has trouble with focus. I haven't had an issue personally, but I think a lot of that comes down to the install of the autofocuser. You want to get that coupler on there right, and you want the tension to be just right. I think things can kind of come up there. So if the person asking has a backlash issue, before you know addressing it as the actual focuser on the telescope, I would maybe uninstall it and put it back on and see if there's something there. But yeah, I haven't personally had an issue with that autofocuser on that telescope, which was it was something because there's a lot of weight on that camera, and I'm usually putting it on the underside of a refractor. So that was a new process for me to put it on a Newtonian like this. So it doesn't surprise me to hear some issues creeping up on a configuration like that. So good luck with that.
All right. Thank you, Trevor.
Great. So when you're done your session in the morning, you've got you park the mount or just send it home. Really important if you're using a harmonic drive mount, because they'll just freeze in place in a somewhat unbalanced manner, and then you don't want to be lifting it around and carrying it with that unbalanced load like that. So put it back to the home position when you're done. Shut down the ASIAIR. You can pull your USB drive off of that ASIAIR to get the data after it's been shut down, and then transfer the data. If I do have a stretch of usually in September we get this where I might actually get 3 or 4 nights in a row, I'll actually leave the rig outside, not transfer any data, and just put a cover over it. So for you I think there was someone in Arizona. That's where you could probably leave your telescope out a lot longer than I can here in Ontario. But yeah, that's the process there. If you are using a traditional EQ mount, like a Skywatcher EQ6 or something, much less of an issue to send the mount home because, of course, you could just release the clutches and do that yourself. But yeah, they shut everything down. don't leave the camera on all day. It's going to be struggle to stay cool with that sun beating down on it, all that stuff. So pretty simple process shutting it down. There are things you can do in that plan that I mentioned where you can say, okay, at a certain time or after 60 subs are done, and say that's 3:30 in the morning, go home from here, and that's something you can actually set in there. I rarely do that because I kind of run something until sunup kind of thing. But my lifestyle revolves around taking pictures through a telescope, so it's makes less sense for some people. Some tips and tricks here. Cable management is I'm as guilty as it gets. I get people give me a hard time for my cable management all the time. You can see those loose cables everywhere. I do make sure that nothing's going to snag, and I kind of tie things up and keep them all as clean as possible. The only reason my cables aren't more clean is because I'm demoing different gear all the time. So I'm constantly taking these things apart and putting it back together in another system. And so to wrap things up too much wouldn't make much sense because I'd just be unwrapping it again. The meridian flip is a big thing the first few times doing that. So when your object goes past that imaginary meridian line in the sky, your telescope has to flip all the way over and start tracking it again. Being around when that happens is important if you're unsure about cable snags and stuff like that, or if your mount's going to successfully find the object again and start recapturing it, that kind of thing. Once you do it a few times on your system, it's really painless and you won't have to worry about it. And then using that station mode is absolutely key. I wasn't using it for a few years, and I would come with my phone and walk closer to the backyard or up to the garage door just to get a connection. And then even then, sometimes it was a weak one just to monitor my session. So definitely use that station mode whenever possible. Common mistakes, second last slide here. So oh wow, we're doing actually really good for time and questions. Updates, this does streamline the experience and takes away a lot of the annoyances, software and hardware side of things for astrophotography, but there are updates quite frequently for the ASIAIR. So you want to do those early before it gets dark. You don't even want to spend 10 minutes under a clear moonless sky installing updates on your ASIAIR. That would be very frustrating. Unfortunately, sometimes too, bugs do come up because there's all these new features and updates coming up. So some people actually avoid doing the latest update until, they wait a little while and see what people are saying in the Facebook groups to see if these bugs are worked out. I usually update right away. I just roll the dice, and they're usually pretty good at addressing any bugs that are in the latest update. And more often than not, it's user error behind most of the issues you see. Inadequate power is something you need to think about. So they don't come with a power cable. So the ones I use are usually a 12 volt, 5 amp. I use one of those to power the ASIAIR and my mount separately. You want a quality one of those too, because you wouldn't want to lose power. And we're running this stuff outside too. Some of those power adapters weren't really meant to be outside and to deal with moisture in the cold and stuff. So buy a quality power adapter. If you're not sure which one to get, if you go to the vendor websites, whether it's High Point Scientific, Agena, or whoever you buy from, usually they have a recommended power adapter to accompany the ASIAIR, and you can either buy it from them or just see which one they recommend. Okay. Oh, sorry. This is the last slide here. The ZWO ecosystem. This is really the only negative thing with the ASIAIR, and it's a big one for a lot of people, is that it ties you into the ZWO ecosystem of their gear. They do it for several reasons. One is because they've created this system where you're going to buy more and more ZWO products. Imagine that, this business trying to make money. Two, they can better control that experience because it's talking to their gear only. So there's less of these headaches and surprises that come up when it's not compatible with this new camera and all these things. So they don't have to worry about all that because it's just controlling all the gear that they make. So love it or hate it, it's too bad if you don't use ZWO, but you want to use the ASIAIR. But now there's alternatives like the TubeTech Stella Vita is the latest. I have high hopes for this. I'm on the fence about it, because I'm so used to the ASIAIR experience to see if it will deliver that streamlined experience using these alternative cameras like Tube Tech. I will be using a rig like that in the very near future, so we'll see how that works out. But that's the biggest drawback of the ASIAIR. And this is the image we'll be processing in the image processing portion coming up next in Photoshop. But any questions about the ASIAIR?
Yeah, we do have another
Y-
question from Matt Borton. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so you mentioned the ecosystem. I have an ASI Air with ZWO cameras, but I don't have an AM5 mount or AM7. So do you find that there is better communication with the ZWO mounts rather than Lost Mandy or other?
Nope.
No. Okay.
It's the same experience. So I'm usually I use my Skywatcher mounts and the AM5 mount
Hmm.
pretty equally. I don't even think about it. It's a seamless connection.
Okay.
Yeah, that's with Skywatcher. With your Losmandy, I haven't tested them all, but at least in terms of Skywatcher mounts, which I know are pretty popular in the industry, it's absolutely seamless. The biggest change for the AM5 and AM7 and all that is just the fact that it's a harmonic strain wave, so it's a bit
Hmm.
it's a different process of setting it up and everything. But in terms of compatibility with mounts, they're pretty good.
Okay. One last question, if I could. Do you have any experience using ASI Air with solar photography?
I so the thing with planetary imaging, it's as you know, if you've done solar or if
Hmm.
you've captured planets, the whole capturing video process, it's a whole different animal than deep sky. And I personally use fire capture on a laptop for doing my solar stuff
Hmm.
and my planetary stuff just to get that high frame rate and stuff. I I think, and this is my hesitation to use the ASI Air for stuff like that. I think the Wi-Fi connection and the quick frame rates is something that I just, it needs, it's so quick and it's these video files that I go old school with a laptop for stuff like that. Storage too. My goodness, taking a high resolution sun video,
Hmm.
it creeps up to 20 gigs in like whatever, like 5 minutes. And my thumb drive would fill up and it would crash. So like, yeah, that's a whole different animal. For solar, I'm sure people are doing it, and there is a simple planetary and live mode on the ASI Air. But I think more often than not, if you're getting serious about solar and capturing these large videos, you probably still be using Fire Capture or Sharp Cap on your laptop.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, Matt. The next question will cost you a quarter, so you better hold.
Okay. I'm done. I'm done.
All right, all right. Tim Kurtz, you had a question. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it.
All right, so with the Sky Atlas, you frame up your target, it goes into your plan, and so I'll set up a night and I'll run multiple targets. And sometimes I'll run that same plan, multiple nights in a row when we get that rare occasion. But when I clear off my data, I've been leaving just a single image in that folder just in case I want to do that same frame maybe next year or something. Do I still need to leave that on there, or is that
That's
data
so,
stored?
yeah, that's super smart. Yeah, so that's when I mentioned earlier, just for everyone, about going back to a project and continuing it over time. So there's this awesome feature where you click on your image from the night before and you say go to from here. Just match up with this last image as a reference, as opposed to framing it up from memory or whatever. So that's a really smart move to leave at least one image from your previous session as something to match it to. And as far as I know, that's the best way to do that. I would do the same thing. So if I'm committed to a project over multiple nights, I usually keep in this case, if it was a Trifid, I'll just keep that Trifid folder going and putting everything on top of it. But you're right. If you took everything out of that folder, you'd be missing your matching plate solve image to match to. So super smart, and it's yeah, I like that. You really only need to leave that one image in there. So that's all I do. I'm not sure if there's any other way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
One more question from another one of our club astrophotographers, Pete Mumbauer. Can the ASIAIR work with domes?
No, there's no dome control as far as I know. Yeah, so that would be because you know, I've only used Nina a little bit. I'm sad to say, but does Nina have dome control? Because it's either I think it does, or you can actually have a lot of these domes have their own software just for running that. But I'm not an observatory guy. I had a Skyshed pod very briefly, but I opened it manually. So yeah, the ASIAIR, no dome control, not as far as I know. Of
All right, thanks, Trevor.
course, anytime. All right, I'm just back to me. So yeah, I think we have the processing portion of this next. If people are ready to and willing to go another hour,
I'm ready. Let's do it.
let's do it. Okay. So I did do a slideshow for this, but I'd be really hopping back and forth. I think we're going to spend, I guess, the whole time in, let me just share my screen again, in the processing software itself. So um, I hope I don't lose anyone with this because I get pretty clicky back and forth when I'm processing. So I'll talk you through it, and this slide is important though, so we'll just go through this first. So I know in this description we talked about Photoshop. There's a few things that I do in PixInsight before I bring the image into Photoshop that are really, really important. And it's not to say that you couldn't do these things in Photoshop, you know, exclusively, but a PixInsight slash Photoshop, you know, processing routine is really the best case scenario. So the data we're going to process is just 60 times 2 minutes on the Trifid Nebula, which really isn't a lot of integration time, but it was shot under Bortle 1 skies. So it's just really, really quality data. For anyone that's been, you know, image processing even a few images, you know what a difference it makes and how much more fun it is to process an image captured under dark skies and how much easier it is. But the keys to a great image, quality data, you want it to be sharp, not too noisy, looks good up close, looks good at a glance. That's sometimes people get too pixel peepy in there and they, you know, they want it to look good and then the image as a whole doesn't really have the impact. So you want to kind of cover both grounds. Not oversaturated. There's a, you know, that's open for debate. Stars not destroyed and not clipped in any way. So those are the keys to a quality image. Speaking of PixInsight, so I use PixInsight for stacking and some of the early stage calibration of the image. And I also use these RC Astro plugins that I'm sure the intermediate to advanced users are familiar with, like Blur Exterminator, Noise Exterminator, and Star Exterminator. If you are Photoshop exclusive and listening to this, and this does get a little bit technical for PixInsight, I apologize, but you will get a lot out of the steps that I do take in Photoshop when we do get there. So for Photoshop, that's great for layers, color enhancements. Adobe Camera Raw is unbelievable for manipulating the image in so many ways. And then the layers and layer masks, I find Photoshop to be superior to PixInsight for that kind of stuff. So we'll get into the first step of PixInsight here. I've got it open. We've got the data. And this is a tool that just to review your image frame. So it's called Blink, and it's just going to play this quick little video of all my images. And it's one of the best ways to just review your individual subs. Because if something stands out, you could just remove that before stacking or anything. So I love blinking an image. What's really cool about this one, I don't know if anyone remembers in May 2023, there was an asteroid going by near the Trifid Nebula. And I can't see if I can find, you see it in my stack. It's somewhere around here, but it just looks like a star slowly moving through. That's pretty cool. So when you see that, I'll point it out. So that's just for reviewing your data. But as for stacking, there's a million stacking tools out there, so many good ones, and I'm sure, well, I'm happy to answer questions about those. But I think the best one right now is the weighted batch pre-processing. One thing you have to get used to with PixInsight is everything has an overly technical long name that just sounds really technical. That's just the way it goes. But really, it's pretty simple. It's really plug and play this. I've put in my 69 light frames here. I guess there's actually 69, not 60. 120 seconds each. I didn't use flats, darks, or oh no, I did use some darks and some bias, but no flats. Shame on me. You can get away with that under dark skies, and then making sure the maximum quality setting is here, and then choosing your output directory and just running it. It takes a long time. I won't put you through that, but this is the stack here in its linear state. So there's linear and nonlinear, which is you can just think of as unstretched and stretched. The great thing about PixInsight is that it has this amazing auto stretch tool called screen transfer function, where you can actually see what's in your image without actually applying the stretch. And that is where PixInsight really wins over Photoshop. Not only can I preview what's in my image and make adjustments, but I can apply things to it in its linear state before stretching. In some actions you want to do before stretching. Any quick questions at this stage?
I don't see anything related to Photoshop in the chat, but I thought Matt Borton had his hand raised again. Nope, there he is. All right, Matt, this is going to cost you a quarter, but go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's some comments coming through. I don't know if you're changing your slide deck. If you were intended to.
Thank you.
Okay, I
It's
didn't catch
because
that.
I changed the screen that I'm sharing.
Oh yeah, nope, that happens.
Sorry about that, guys.
Nope, it's
You seeing it
okay.
now? Yeah, I
Thanks,
mean,
Matt.
if you weren't confused already, not seeing my screen would really get you confused. Okay, you seeing it now?
Yeah, we see the image of the Trifid.
Okay, and this little bar moving around?
Mm, I got too much stuff in the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I think this is it. Okay, I think I got to see the green box around it.
Okay.
Are you seeing me move the image around a little bit?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. We're in PixInsight. Sorry about that. I was stuck on the slideshow. Okay, I'll carry on. So when I was talking about the making seeing the non-linear preview, this is the stacked image, just linear, just a couple of dots on the screen, and then you can get this non-linear preview to see what's in your image. Now, I'm not actually applying this stretch to it, not like I would if I applied a curve stretch in Photoshop. I'm just seeing a preview. So where this is handy right out of the gate is that the first thing I'm going to do is crop the image a little bit, because this was with a full frame camera and there's a bit of vignetting falling off the edges there. This telescope wasn't quite up to the task of a full frame sensor. So for that, I'm going to use the dynamic crop. They couldn't just call it crop. It has to be dynamic. So I'm going to crop it here. And I'll try to go quick through kind of the less fun parts and slow down for the fun parts. So we've got it cropped, simple image crop thing. So, okay, we've got our stretched image here. And look at that. I already jumped the gun. The first thing you want to do is actually color calibration. So if you're in the photography world, it's actually more like white balance. So before you've done anything, there's a tool called photometric color calibration, just for the sake of not skipping anything. It's a very subtle change. Let's get it in here.
I do want to mention we'll have more on PixInsight next month too.
Yeah, I'll speed through this to get to Photoshop. This was a Photoshop talk after all. All right, there we've got our image. And I can actually go a few steps further, but essentially the tools I use before Photoshop are those Russell Astro paid plugins: Noise Exterminator, Blur Exterminator, and Star Exterminator. The big one is extracting the stars. That is really a key part of the process. And without doing that, you're like you have so much more control. So let's look at this starless stretch. So look at that. It's kind of scary to see all the muddiness and all the crazy colors and data that's flying in the image there. But of course, this is just an auto stretch of what's lying in the image. So I'm not going to do my stretch of the data in PixInsight, but I did calibrate it to get it to this point, and remove the stars from the image using that star exterminator plugin. So if you want to see what my stars look like, there's just the stars, and there's the underlying nebula. You'll see what I mean when we get into Photoshop here, and I just open the starless image. So there's not much there. It's just a very dim nebula, and we're going to start using Photoshop to do our adjustments now. And I see a green box. You guys came with me to Photoshop, right?
We did, yes. We see
Okay,
Photoshop.
good. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is, if it's because PixInsight uses a 32-bit image workspace, in Photoshop to get all the features, you're going to want to convert that to 16-bit. So don't let that alarm you right out of the gate. Usually when I'm in PixInsight, I'll save it as 16-bit, preemptively before coming into Photoshop. But yeah, so we have a 16-bit image here. And so we'll get into some of the curve stretching here. So this is a very typical looking histogram for a linear image in Photoshop. All the data is just crammed up against the left there, and we can start doing these simple curve stretches like this. And the key is to do several small stretches and not one big one. I've just duplicated the layer there just in case. So I'm going to do another one here, just like I did before. And you'll see that histogram slowly start to kind of fill up more of the graph. You can see more of the nebula coming there, and even some of the more the H alpha hiding beneath it. But this curve stretching routine is absolutely pivotal for stretching a color image like this. Now, if you see me kind of pulling down the curve on this side, that's just because I don't want to, if it's hitting this wall here, I'm clipping the highlights in the brightest parts of the nebula there. So a good curves looks more like this one here. Another thing you can do too is, we're using layers here in Photoshop. You want to make a lot of copies of your layer. So let's say this one, I do another curve stretch just to bring it up a little further, and I'm starting to get a little too bright in certain areas. I can not only go back to where I was before by clicking on the underlying layer, but you could also actually remove just the brightest parts of this layer to get in there. But for now, this is a pretty good spot to start playing with the colors of the image here. So that's curves. That's all we've done so far. One of the biggest advantages of creating a starless image, removing those stars, we're going to put them back in, is not only controlling the star size and shape and not destroying them in the process like we would do if we left them in the image and tried to process it as a whole, but other things really stand out now in this image that would be kind of hidden if the stars were still there. Excuse me. One of the ones you can see here is these brutal star halos. So there was it wasn't high clouds, but the transparency, there was moisture in the air. And whenever that happens, you get these halos sometimes. Sometimes you get them from the optics of your telescopes, but there's something you need to deal with. We could, of course, leave them in, but it's going to, more often than not, you're going to want to clean these up manually. So I'll show you how to do that. Here's the asteroid that was passing by, or the remnants of the stack, by the way. So that's where it was. And these two stars that it's left here, for whatever reason, Star Exterminator thought that was a galaxy or something. So we're going to have to kind of fix that as well. So it left those two little stars there, where this portion down here is actually nebulosity. But in terms of cleaning up these star halos, very common issue. You could do something like get your elliptical marquee tool, put a nice feather on it. I've got a feather of 8. Why don't we change that to 11? And then we will, draw a little circle over it. And then there's a tool called content aware fill. So if you can go into edit and fill, content aware, usually that does a pretty good job. So we've got the before and after for that. Where you run into trouble is if you're one, removing a key part of the nebula in this process, or two, introducing something that isn't there. So you've really kind of taken away the scientific value of the image. Like we will in other ways too by manipulating the colors, but these kind of cleanup moments are really dangerous for that, especially this one where it's overlapping into that blue reflection nebulosity. So this one's a lot trickier. So I'm going to use a feather of 15, and I'm just going to try and grab the halo here. And I have a feeling the content aware fill isn't going to work in this case. Yeah, see, look, it's tried to add additional data there. Another tool you can use here is the patch tool. This is in like the healing brush category. You can kind of do that. And we've cleaned it up a bit. It's not perfect, but it's better than before. You can see why it's so important to leave that underlying layer to see before you did it. I won't spend too much longer on this. I'll get rid of this one's really standing out because it's kind of purple. And in this case, I'm going to use the patch tool again. Oops. On this layer and do that. Not perfect, but a lot better. So what you can do as well, if you're kind of worried about how much you've changed it, just put this layer to 66%. So you've made it better, but you've really kept a lot of that original signal in there too. So at this point, I'm just going to create a topmost layer of where we're at. So all we've done is really cleaned it up, done some curve stretches, and now we'll get into Adobe Camera Raw, one of my favorite tools. So if you go into filter and the camera raw filter, now this is where you can have a lot of fun with the image. So you want to get to a spot. So we're going to focus on the colors of not only the Trifid Nebula here, but some of the H alpha behind it and some of the structure. So saturation and vibrance are pretty obvious, right? You can just globally apply that. Usually a subtle adjustment is kind of nice depending on your taste. You don't want to go too crazy there. And then where it really gets interesting is when you get into the color mixer and you can adjust individual colors the way you want it. So if you feel that blue is a little too cool or too ghostly and white, I can make that a lot more blue, or go the other way and make it kind of whitish. I'm kind of leaning towards just a little bit more blue. And then the saturation of the magentas of the emission nebula portion of the Trifid, I'll boost those up a little bit too. So that was just the saturation. If you think that the color hue is a little bit off, so if you wanted this to be a little bit more on the orange side, orange or brown side, which nobody would on the Trifid, you could adjust that. More often than not in the hues, I'm adjusting the greens to be more blue, or purples to be more blue. Those are pretty common adjustments in the hue. And then the luminance, as you can imagine, pretty nice effect here to pull up just the luminance of that blue reflection there. A couple of tools that I like to use in here are the clarity and dehaze. You need to be careful with these, but watch what happens when I adjust the clarity here. It kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It's a contrast kind of adjustment. The dehaze is also kind of nice as well. They're in the contrast category. So we've done a few adjustments there, nothing too crazy. But if you look at the before and after, we've done some serious improvements in terms of color with that Adobe Camera Raw filter. Hopefully it's not bothering you too much to see this image in its starless state still. So another powerful feature of Photoshop is using these channels and kind of diagnosing the image, looking at it in these different channels. So right out of the gate, if I want to get these reds to bump up a little bit, so I'm going to copy the red channel and paste it as a layer on top, and then we can play with this a little bit. So I'm just going to do some curve stretches to just this red channel. And what I did there was hold control on kind of a mid-tone and then control on a dark spot. That's command on a Mac. And now it's plotted these 2 points. So where I'm just pulling up some of the more mid-tones on the Trifid Nebula here. So if I go back, I'm just going to create a new image so we can see the before after and apply our adjusted red channel. It's a little bit brighter and it's changed the whole look of the image. We've got more of the red nebulosity in the back there. Very cool stuff. So that was super haphazard, but the idea of adjusting each channel of your color image is really powerful in Photoshop. And more often than not, if you're using a one-shot color camera, your blue channel will have a weaker signal, so you could independently adjust that. You could apply just noise reduction to your blue channel with that weak signal if you wanted, but lots of fun there. So now let's get into some of the adjustment of the stars. So I'm just going to open up my star image here. What did I call them? Is it just stars? Here we go. So these are the stars it's pulled out of the image using Star Exterminator and PixInsight. And it's, there's not a whole lot there because they're unstretched right now. So what I like to do is actually put them on top of the starless image before I make any adjustments. Let me just make sure that's in 16-bit. Yep. So because I haven't cropped or changed the scale of anything, I know that by pasting it right on top, it's perfectly aligned with the original image. So the blend mode for combining them is screen. So when you put that screen mode, it's going to allow them to shine through. And it's pretty incredible to see how tiny these stars are right now in this state, unstretched. Now, you could just place them back in the image like this for a really punchy nebula image, but those stars need some work, in my opinion. It looks a little silly like this, although it's a look. It's a look to have them that small. So the same way we used curves to adjust the nebula, you can do curve stretches like that for the stars. And again, the name of the game is several small stretches. And then we'll get into some cool stuff like adjusting the shape, size, and color of the stars, because that makes a big difference. So we're seeing more and more of that data on the histogram from the stars. And we're seeing the medium-sized stars, the large stars, and the small ones. Now, if I really wanted to get really amazing stars, I would have captured them separately using shorter exposures. They're actually blown out and overexposed in the core of these stars because I capture them at 2 minutes and they're quite bright. I'm not going to obsess over that. And I think they look still quite good at these 120-second exposures. You can also see, whereas it might have not stood out so much, but look at those halos. It creates kind of an odd look if you haven't kind of cleaned those up. So I could continue to clean those up, and I would if this was an image I was spending hours and hours on. But for the tutorial's sake, the stars are back in, and now we can start coloring them, or at least improving the color of them. So again, we'll go back into that camera raw filter. And then we'll just get right in close so we can see a nice mix of star colors. So an easy one, because they're kind of pale right now, one that I do all the time is just a straight up saturation boost to the star color, because some nice, vibrant, varying star colors, warm ones, cool ones, always has a nice look in an image, and it's kind of subtle. And then back into that color mixer. And if you can see those orange, yellow stars, they're a little pale and a little red. I'd rather them be more in the yellow than in the orange, so we can make them a little more yellow and less orange. Again, this is very artistic into taste. And then I'm going to bump the saturation in those warmer color stars as well. So now we've got some warm, older stars contrasting the cool blue ones. We can adjust the color for the blue ones too. This is where pulling it away from green and into blue is handy for stars, or away from purple, stuff like that. So this is just manipulating the colors of the stars. Not a whole lot else to do in there other than the color control. But it does make a difference. So now we have the varying star colors of a respectable size in there, still quite small where it looks, there's a little bit of a disconnect in the image. So we can pull those up just a little bit more. And if we go all the way up like this, that's going to be more of like what it would look like if we brought the stars along with our nebula in terms of how much we stretched it. So there's kind of a middle ground there. Whereas if you keep the stars small, it draws your eye in more to the nebula. But if it's too small, it just doesn't look natural at all. So finding that balance is kind of the name of the game. And to me, it's somewhere around here. So there you go. So this is an image. You could call it done at this point, but I would go in and adjust some of these halos in there. Just as a yeah, I that could get very time consuming, but you notice a difference there. So in terms of the nebula, it's looking a little bit bright. I'd like some more color in there. This is where we can do some stuff like layer masks. So a real simple one, if you do a select color range, and then we've got a little eyedropper here, we can pick just these magentas here. And you can already see on that little preview that it's roughly made that selection of just manipulating this part of the image, whether we wanted to do noise reduction or color. It's included some of that blue as well. But Photoshop has this amazing tool called Select and Mask, where you can really refine the mask to an amazing level. It's hidden from me here. So this is where you can shift the edges. So this is where we can get more of the magenta and less of that blue, and the contrast and the feather, and you can get really dialed in with the mask you want to do. More often than not, you want quite a feather on the edges of the mask because you don't want hard edges between the spots that you're changing in the others. So we've got this better mask here, and you can see through the marching ants. And then with that selection, a new adjustment layer we'll just do hue saturation. So you can see in my layers palette here, it's got that mask section. And so anything I adjust here is just going to be applied to that mask that I put in. And that's really the power of masks. So that's kind of the official way of doing a mask. But I also like to do the apply to all and kind of just reveal what's behind it method too. So if I do a top layer here, I've got the entire starless image. I've got my stars on top to put them back in. I can get rid of this guy here. And now I'll do some more serious adjustments in that camera raw with a filter on top. Camera raw filter. And bear with me here, it's going to seem extreme. So we're going to bump up the saturation, the vibrance. We're going to pull down the highlights. We're going to bump up the clarity and the dehaze. And it's getting pretty aggressive here. I'm going to make the blue a little bluer, bring the blues up a little bit. We're really getting wild here. And then I might even do some noise reduction, sharpening. I'm just kind of having fun letting my mind just have fun with it, with the color. And so we've got our exaggerated, had way too much fun version on top, or maybe you like it. But beneath it, our more, responsible version. So I'm going to put our responsible version on top of the wacky one. And I could either dial the opacity down just to make myself feel better to 80%. And I've just made that, a subtle, fun adjustment to colors there. Or maybe because you didn't really want to bring the rest of the sky with it, maybe now that we have this layer on top, we'll just go in with a nice soft feathered eraser and just artistically reveal the spots kind of as we see fit. And this is where you put your own creative flair on it. You wouldn't think using an eraser would have such an effect, but it really isolates what you're doing to the image. And for my processing, I do a lot of that. And you can get carried away easily too. So, you know, it's a very time-consuming process. Um, so this is kind of what I would consider getting close to done, you know, minus some of that cleanup. Let's look at the final I ended up with when I yeah, so this was the final as I saw fit earlier today when I was just working through this data. So I cleaned up those halos a lot more, and what I really tried to focus on was getting the hydrogen alpha details in the background to really show up. And that was all done through you know, processes of like what I showed you. And without talking about the PixInsight side of things, just know that PixInsight was used for the deconvolution process, which is like kind of sharpening and star minimizing. That's the blur exterminator. The star exterminator you saw to separate the two images, and that's where I do my noise reduction as well. These images weren't very overly noisy in general, but PixInsight has some incredible noise reduction plugins like that noise exterminator and gradient extractor too. Gradients can be very time consuming, and because this was captured under Bortle 1 skies, we luckily didn't have a whole lot of gradients, but that kind of stuff is done in PixInsight as well. But it's kind of this back and forth between PixInsight for key steps like that, and then the artistic flair in color in Photoshop. So masks, select and mask, refining them, channels, revealing behind, and that kind of stuff. Questions for this stage?
Yeah, we do have one question from Tim Kurtz in the chat. Have you used Lightroom instead of Camera Raw in Photoshop?
I have a few times, usually more for my wide field Milky Way shots and stuff like that. Very similar, if not identical, the same. I'm sure it looked very familiar, those tools. So you could bring the image into Lightroom to do that stuff, where I think Photoshop is maybe has more tools, would be in the masking and the layers and stuff like that. But that, yeah, Adobe Camera Raw in there is great, especially for final tweaks. I think one of my, you know, key tips I have for people is to, when you think the image is done and you're ready to share it, just do a version where you just bump up the saturation a little bit, bump up the brightness, and then compare and say, wait, did I make it better or worse? That kind of stuff.
All right. Have you ever tried doing a processing tutorial in GIMP?
I have not in GIMP. GIMP is a free Photoshop alternative. I'm sure it's been updated to include a lot of the new stuff. And yeah, it's I hear it can do a great job considering it's free. Photoshop, of course, is a paid subscription. I have not. I have not. There's so many processing tools. Cyril's a really good one that can do a start to finish process. There's a lot of great tools. I will always be a Photoshop guy just because I've been using it for 20 20 plus years now. And yeah, I just love Photoshop, and I subscribe to it for all the creative stuff I do with AstroBackyard and the videos and stuff like that. I have not done GIMP yet.
All right, one more here. Have you ever done any of the image calibration stacking in Photoshop? If so, what is your impression?
So stacking and calibration in Photoshop, I still do that for a lot of my wide field, like Milky Way nightscape style shots. So let's say I've done the Milky Way with a foreground, and I have taken 10 30-second shots. I'll manually stack them to reduce noise in Photoshop. It just doesn't really make sense to do that I don't even think PixInsight could do that. I also use Sequator for projects like that, and it does work quite well for small scale projects. I would say that you could even do a deep sky project like this too, especially if you're using a mirrorless camera or a DSLR. It does have an auto register, auto stack that can kind of hit or miss work well. If you've only taken like 10 exposures, which is usually the case for my kind of nightscape style shots, totally worth it to stack that in Photoshop and then just reduce the opacity and do some stacking that way. For big, long deep sky projects, it's pretty much always PixInsight or Deep Sky Stacker that I use for stacking, and then Sequator for landscape or nightscape stuff.
And I will mention Alan will be doing the Milky Way landscapes toward the end of the year.
I was thinking of Alan when we were talking of that kind of photography. He's the master with that kind of stuff and constantly inspiring me with his work and has been for years.
That's right. Be there. That's what Alan says in the chat.
Is there anything else that I know I kind of rushed through that if I need to clear anything up about some of the steps? I did kind of rush through the PixInsight stuff because it can take a long time to get through that stuff, especially running the processes. Just even running Blur Exterminator takes a minute and a half. So I tried to just briefly go over that and get it right into Photoshop.
Looks like it's pretty question free out there.
Great. Um, yeah, one thing I will add too, sometimes there's these action sets. This one's quite old now. It's called the Astronomy Tools Action Set, and it just puts these complex tasks, all these different things are happening, and into a one-click play button. So if you want to get more into the script style of editing like PixInsight does, but for Photoshop, check out the Astronomy Tools Action Set. One of them here that we're going to do local contrast enhancement. This one's a bit intense, but you can see I'm pressing play and it's going to do all these steps. Boom, in one click, I've made that change to the image. So if we just go back in history, there's my history. And paste it on top. You can see that one-click script we've done for contrast, and then I'd probably bring that back. Yeah, I did want to mention that. So look for that action set for if you're a Photoshop user. Really, really handy. Other than that, I hopefully you guys were inspired and I didn't go too fast through the processing. Just to give you an idea, I was processing this image earlier before the talk, and I spent believe 6 hours on it. Just having fun, listening to music, getting right into it. It's one of the best parts of the hobby is the image processing. Don't look at it as something as a chore. It's one of the best parts.
We did have a question from Alan in the chat. Have you tried any of the new tools from, is it Cyquan or Verilux?
Yes, the Verilux stretch. Yes, that's another hit or miss. So scripts in general I don't know if Verilux is available for Photoshop. That would be cool if it was. But PixInsight is known for all these scripts that people write, and they're usually free. And it's kind of a one-click apply all these steps to your image. And there's more stretching ones than ever now. The Verilux is the latest one that I've used. And I do use that sometimes and compare it to my stretch in Photoshop. And I'll either see which one is better or do a combination of the two. Another great one is the generalized hyperbolic stretch or GHS. That's one that gives you a little more control. And then, of course, the baked in the STF auto stretch is a tool you can use as well. So there's so many exciting new scripts for lots of different things, but especially for stretching in PixInsight. And I'm not sure if that one is available for Photoshop as well. That would be cool.
Okay. Of course, somebody asked, what music do you listen to when you're in Photoshop?
It's because to think better, nothing with lyrics. I'll do ambient stuff from like my favorite video games. Skyrim kind of has Jeremy Soule has an amazing score for that game. My mind just is, a giant cup of coffee and listen to that and get lost in the image and just really study it and look at every little part of it. It's so much fun.
Well, I used to work in a planetarium years ago, so I like John Seary. I don't know if you ever listened to him.
No. Does that go well with the stars?
It does. It's very spacey music. Yeah, it's
Oh, I
like
love
new
it.
age type planetarium music, as I call it.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's the ticket. I know Nico Carver says he listens to classical music. So that's pretty cool. That's higher class than me, but that I could also see how that would make the experience that much nicer.
I'm happy to share some of my John Seary collection with you if you like.
For sure. Yeah, I'll look them up as soon as I'm done.
Sure. What other great resources do you recommend for astrophoto processing and Photoshop?
So for processing in general, if on the PixInsight side of things, Luco Matico, his YouTube channel, he is such a breath of fresh air where he makes it so understandable. I've learned so much from him. For Photoshop, Nico uses Photoshop, although he does a lot of serial stuff right now. I'll continue to do my Photoshop astrophotography tutorials, and I have several up. But nothing's jumping out specifically Photoshop and deep sky processing. But I'm sure Nico has some stuff out there and still uses it, and then my AstroBackyard channel as well.
Okay. Have you heard anything about Affinity?
Affinity Photo. So I have. It's another a lot. There's a growing number of Photoshop alternatives because people don't like the subscription model. And from what I've seen, I haven't used that one personally. I bet it's does a great job, and especially if you're not a Photoshop aficionado and that started with it and fell in love with it 20 years ago, I would imagine it's a pretty good user experience if you're just getting into it to start with that and that one-time payment. So I haven't used that one personally, but I've heard good things.
Let's see. Does the process differ processing dark nebulae, such as the Shark Nebula?
It does in the way where it's more stretching and more because you're dealing with those low lightness levels. You're not worried about clipping highlights anymore like you are with this one, where these dramatic differences in brightness levels. It's more of pulling up that underlying data carefully, and that's where star removal really comes in. The dark shark stands out as one of those ones where it's that really dark brown dust, and getting the separation from a dark nebula on top of a dark night sky or the absence of stars. Removing the stars really makes it easier to do the stretching on an image like that. Those are some of the most challenging projects where they really need to be captured under dark skies. Dealing with gradients and sky glow and light pollution for a dark nebula would be an absolute nightmare.
Greg Shanos asked, can you go over how to use the eraser to sharpen?
Yes. So let's say I've got this. Let me just do a before and after image here. Okay, so I've got my top layer. I haven't done anything yet to yet, and my original underneath. So on this layer, let's say we do some major sharpening. I'll just use the camera raw filter again. It has a sharpening tool. I'm in a little deep here. So I changed the clarity and the sharpening. So pretty cool. Like you can really go overboard, but in some cases, maybe some parts you really want to be pretty sharp. And these tendrils here, you definitely might want to. So I've done a really aggressive sharpen, but I've applied it overall. So all my stars are these punchy dots, and I've really destroyed the image. But we have our regular version on top, and now I'll use the eraser tool. So it's literally just the eraser tool, but the key is changing the size here, and you want the hardness to be all the way down to 0. So it's a pretty soft feathered eraser and about this size. Even more importantly is the opacity of the eraser. If I apply this at 100%, it's just going to be like punched holes right through it. That's no good. You want that opacity to be down low to say 12%. And now it's multiple clicks and spots where I want it to be sharp. So we've got that underlying layer. Let's get this portion. It might even be hard to see how subtle this is, but it's pretty powerful. So I'm just getting the defined edges on these ridges here. So because my sharp layer is underneath and my untouched layer is on top, the areas I remove are going to get sharp. And it's a really fun, intuitive way to process. There you go. So now if we step out a bit, Now we can turn the sharp layer underneath off and on. Very subtle. You could probably see it more when I look at that difference. That kind of stuff is very, very powerful. Very selective sharpening. Actually, that is an improvement of the image overall. I think I'm in a better place than I was before you brought that up. So thank you.
Let's see. Is it possible to process nebulae and stars separately within Photoshop? I don't have PixInsight, and I'm curious if there are any other ways to do it.
Yes. So before Star Exterminator, there was StarNet plus plus, which was a script that someone just coded themselves. And it didn't run in Photoshop, but it was a standalone tool and it was free. I believe it still exists. You take your image that you want to remove the stars from, run it in StarNet plus plus, and it has an output folder and it gives you actually at that time it just gave you the starless image. It didn't give you a stars image on its own. I think it might now, but if you just need that starless image, which is still really handy, you can use StarNet plus plus. And that was, PixInsight aside, you could remove stars from the image. It may have an update now where it actually gives you that star layer, which would be really handy, but at least gives you a starless image, and then you can. That's the most important part, right? Because then you can add those stars back in a number of ways.
And of course, Alan added Star Exterminator is available for Photoshop and runs as a filter.
Oh, what a time to be alive! So it's so that is super handy. So that's if you're a Photoshop user, that's a add to cart immediately. The one that doesn't exist is I don't think Blur Exterminator can be in Photoshop because it requires linear data to work. So, but that's just it's sharpening and deconvolution stuff you can do in Photoshop anyway. So.
How critical is it to color calibrate the monitor?
I thought that might come up. It's depending on your monitor, it could be way off. And truthfully, I have not calibrated this monitor, and I've dealt with processing images on a badly calibrated monitor before. And then they just look the black point can be way off. Where it looks like you're clipping the blacks, but on a calibrated monitor, you're at that nice gray point. So it is important to take that step if you can. But if you have a nice modern new monitor that's meant for photo editing, chances are out of the box it's going to be calibrated pretty well. And then the be all end all fail-safe that I like to use is before I share an image or finish an image, I check on multiple devices. I'll check on my phone. I'll send it to Ashley. She'll look at it on her Mac. Because in reality, when you share these images online, they might not have a calibrated image or monitor. So you want to kind of get the image that looks the best on as many different monitors and screens as possible.
And Pete asked, do you handle light pollution gradients in PixInsight or Photoshop?
PixInsight. So my go-to tool, I do like the automatic background extractor, and then there's the dynamic background extractor for more control, and then there's the free Graxpert, which is a script that you could put in as well. Graxpert is great, and that's also a standalone tool that if you're just a Photoshop user, you could use Graxpert.
Great. Everyone does have the ability to unmute themselves. So again, if you want to ask a question, you're welcome to do so. Just sort of chime in politely, of course. It looks like that's pretty much it for questions in the Q&A. I did see one earlier from where'd that go? I lost it. There's so much in the chat. I can't zip through it that fast. But I believe there was another one from Brody. So Brody, if you wanted to unmute yourself and ask it, go ahead, because I can't find it. I know you had one about the ASIAIR, but I forgot what it was. I don't know if anybody else can find it. He asked about GIMP.
I believe it was about if the ASIAIR could handle cold or heat.
Right. Yeah, I found it. Yeah. So going back to the ASIAIR, are there any problems with the ASIAIR getting too cold in the winter or too hot in the summer?
I can confidently say it doesn't have any problems getting too cold in the winter. It's so it kind of runs warm on its own. So it's got that going for it, and I've ran it as cold as it gets, minus 25 degrees Celsius. Not a problem. Never had an issue with the cold. The heat, maybe if you were using that, if you were looking at the sun in Arizona in the middle of the day, something might happen, but I haven't stress tested it for that. But cold, no problem.
Okay, it looks like John wants to ask a question. So, John, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thank, thank you, Richard. Get the mic back into place. Listen, Warren Keller is a friend of mine, but I've been a Photoshop user all through grad school, the whole works. So I was a dealer back when all this was part of PageMaker. But my question is, why use PixInsight at all when all those tools are available for Photoshop, except, as Helen and I both say, Blur Exterminator is not one that doesn't work in Photoshop. But Noise Exterminator, Star Exterminator, Gradient Exterminator are all part of Photoshop Suite 2 for $59.95 each, of course. But yes.
Yeah. So it's really the scripts and the convenience of it more than anything. So yeah, you're right. I could do a start to finish image in Photoshop. And if I did one in PixInsight and one in Photoshop, I bet they'd come out pretty close to the same. It's more the convenience of those scripts. It's kind of like that action set where I used where it's like it's doing 12 steps in one. So just out of convenience, I kind of use that. And then it's that applying processes in the linear state, which is really tough or impossible to do in Photoshop, where I can do the deconvolution in PixInsight, which is sharpening the images and making the stars smaller before I've even stretched it. So that would be really tricky to do in Photoshop. So it's just those early stage things out of convenience.
So the RC Astro plugins don't have scripts for Photoshop where they do in PixInsight. Is that it?
They do for some of them. That specific one, that the deconvolution, the blur exterminator, I think that's the only one. That's
okay.
But I mean, trust me, I'm a heavy Photoshop user. I loved it. I never thought I would use anything else for it. I probably said that at one point, saying I'm never using PixInsight. But they've won me over with just the convenience and speed of some of the tools. So yeah, and I process a lot of images, so I'll take that advantage every chance I get.
I understand.
And Matt Mahler mentions that not to mention PixInsight is a one-time fee cost. It's not on a subscription basis, of course.
Yeah, but in that subscription, you can get so many. I have subscribed to the photography tool set. So not only Photoshop, but I get Lightroom and Bridge, and I love Bridge. I use Bridge even as an editing before I even touch Photoshop, and I'm done.
I love Bridge too. And of course, I'm using Premiere for all my video editing as well. So yeah, this subscription makes a lot more sense when you have one of the plans and you have multiple pieces of software that you use daily. All of a sudden, it doesn't seem like such a bad deal.
I'm retired. I don't have time for video.
There's still
Thank
times.
you. I'm going mute now.
Okay. Thanks, John.
All right, so we're running up on 10 here. Before we call it a night, I wanted to share my screen here this time. I'll do it this time. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us for this special 90th anniversary event. And I do want to mention some of our more recent upcoming activities. Let's see if I can get it to advance here. There we go. So, of course, you're welcome to join us for our next general meeting. Professor Michael Velbel will join us live at the Kalamazoo Area Math and Science Center. He's from Michigan State University, and he'll be speaking on leopard spots and poppy seeds, recent developments in the search for evidence of ancient life on Mars. So if you're a longtime Mars nut like me, you'll really enjoy that meeting. So again, you're welcome to join us in person in Kalamazoo, or you can register and join us on Zoom. And for our next astrophoto tutorial, our own Pete Mumbauer. Many of you might know him from the more recent lecture series because he handled the Q&A, but there he is live and in the flesh there. Well, at least not live, but there he is in the flesh. So that'll be our next 90th anniversary special event. He'll be talking about PixInsight a simple and effective workflow for 2026. So that is also exclusively on Zoom, like the presentation tonight. And you can join us on Friday, April 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I think anybody that's even been using PixInsight for a little while will get something out of that. And we do have many other events in the months ahead that I won't bother to list here tonight, but I'll just mention quite a few. Of course, on May 1st, we're going to have David Levy here in Kalamazoo. At least I think we are. He's kind of skittish here and there about that, but we're going to really push to have him here in Kalamazoo. That'll be on Friday, May 1st. Later in the year, in November, we got a great double feature. We're going to have Babik to Freshie, the very well-known Iranian-American astrophotographer from National Geographic. He'll be joining us live in Kalamazoo, but that'll also be on Zoom. And then again, our good friend Alan Dyer will be doing a presentation on Milky Way nightscapes and processing again later this year in November. So we have many other special events this year in addition to this. So I hope you can join us. And again, Trevor, you're welcome to join us too, like our friend Alan does. So hopefully we picked up another Canadian friend. And you'll notice that this year has a heavy Canadian influence. We had Sarah Seeger, then we had you, then we'll have David, then Alan. So yeah, it's for some reason, some way, this turned into a Canadian celebration too. So there you go.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Richard. You guys are a fun group. I see why Alan joins in, and a lot of activity, a lot of questions, and you don't always see that. So really, really fun to talk to you guys.
Well, that's great. We appreciate that. So if there are no more last minute questions, I believe we will go ahead and call it an evening. So thank you, Trevor.
Sorry, we won't see you at Cherry Springs anymore, Trevor. That's sad to see you go.
Absolutely. It was my favorite star party.
Say hello to Ashley for us all.
I will.
And Rudy.
And Rudy. Thank you.
And Rudy.
Yeah, thank you.